And hi, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. In today's episode, I am speaking with Julieanna Hever, the OG plant-based dietitian, author of the best-selling book, The Complete Idiot's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition, and host of the Choose You Now podcast. Julieanna is a force, a powerful force, and a name in the plant-based world. She was the host of What Would Julieanna Do? Gave TED Talk, and instructed for the eCornell Plant-Based Nutrition Certification Program. She has appeared on the Dr. Oz Show, Harry, and the Steve Harvey Show. And today, Julieanna consults with clients around the globe. Join me today as I chat with Julieanna about the life you can build when you take away decisions and thoughts about food. And there she is. Good morning, Julieanna. How are you?
Good morning, Kirk. I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So for the viewing audience, I think a lot know that I'm in Boulder, but you are in Los Angeles, right?
Born and raised, spent
Born and
my
raised,
entire life.
really?
Yes,
Wow.
I'm
Did
one
you
of those
ever
lucky
venture
ones.
out a little bit?
I spent 2 years at UC Santa Cruz, which was incredible, but came back to UCLA. And then when I was taping my TV show, I had the opportunity to live in New York City for 6 weeks, which was probably six of the best weeks of my life. It was so magnificent.
Really, really. That brings me back. My oldest daughter finished her journalism degree at the University of Oregon, and she spent a lot of my money in New York City, but she spent about 10 weeks doing an externship with a morning show in New York, and she too just had the time of her life. I think she loved it a lot because she knew she didn't have to stay. It was a lot for her. Was that part of your lure as well? It's like, I don't have to set roots here. I can go back home.
No, my dad's side of the family's from New York, so I have a lot of
Oh,
family there and I have a lot of very good friends there. So I spent my life loving it there and thinking about living there, but I never actually committed to it. And my family, my kids and everyone are here. So I
yeah,
enjoyed every
yeah.
minute of it. Also, I was doing my dream job. So it was kind of like a win-win, six
That's
weeks of heaven.
great. That's great. I mean, it's one of those. My wife just took our youngest to New York for the weekend, and I mean, there still isn't a better food mecca anywhere
Mm,
in the world, right? I mean,
no,
it's just
right.
absolutely spectacular. Well, I am super, super excited. I'm incredibly appreciative of your time today. I got to know you by watching you on other shows, as I've shared with you, and I've had that good pleasure of listening and just embracing some of your live events over the years, particularly your passion for plant-based living. And I can be completely transparent and let you know that I grew up in the pastry in a pastry chef's kitchen. My father's a master pastry chef, so I've been around butter for a long time in my life. And I'm not ashamed of that. However, in recent years we have kind of moved over to a plant-based lifestyle in our home, and we'll get into that. It's been something I've really appreciated, particularly because of the way I feel with that diet. And so I'm going to kick off with a fun fact. You were on Rip Esselstyn's Plant Strong podcast, and then he was with me just a few months prior to that, I think in February or so of this year. And the reason I bring that up is that I love how this community is coming together, and we're all collaborating, connecting it within this plant-based sort of community of ours. And speaking of which, as I understand it, you were one of the first. This is a fascinating story. One of the first, if not the very first, to evangelize the term plant-based with one of your cookbooks. Is that accurate? Did I read that
Well,
right?
I will not take credit for what happened was Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who's a mentor of mine,
Okay.
he coined the term whole food plant-based. And at the time when I was, starting to teach and starting to do online work and blogging and writing books, I called myself the plant-based dietitian. So I was the first plant-based dietitian in terms of terminology, but I took that term from Dr. Campbell. And also my book, that's what, yeah, Rip pointed that out when I was on his podcast, I think the first time that I think it might have been one of the first titles published. And that was a whole story because I was hired to write the Complete Idiot's Guide to Vegan Nutrition, but I quickly petitioned to change the title because I am not, I'm a dietitian. This is, it's about the nutrition, it's about the science behind it. And I didn't want to get into any of the ethical things or anything. That's a wonderful, beautiful thing too that adds to eating plants, but it wasn't my expertise. And I knew that that term plant-based was going to take off, because right when I was writing this book, that's when it was in the media with Dr. Dean Ornish and Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, with Bill Clinton and everything. So they were talking about plant-based was becoming a thing. And I just love why Colin coined it, because for me, a vegan diet, a definition of what is a vegan diet, it means it's an exclusive definition. It means I do not eat animals. But a whole food plant-based diet is more inclusive. It means I eat a diet based on whole plant foods. So I love that more inclusivity type of feel. And I always want to open this idea up to the masses. I want everyone to eat more plants. And I don't think that would exclude anyone, because I think that's a health promoting decision that could be done in so many different ways. And I think it's more welcoming and less, daunting for a lot of people who just can't imagine giving up certain things. And I feel like I want as many people to feel as, allured by this idea, because it is the most health promoting way of eating that we know about. So the more plants, the better. And I love that terminology. And I think that words are very, very powerful. And I put a lot of emphasis on how we use language. So I'm pretty excited about how this has all evolved. And now, when I would say plant-based before, nobody knew what I was talking about. And now it really is a thing. It is is something that people recognize worldwide. I've visited remote islands and places around the world, and it is a thing. So it's quite extraordinary how things have evolved.
Yeah, I love that. And I love all the names, right? Like coming back to that Wonder Woman. I love that. Coming back to that community that, you're a part of, that you're helping to build. It's interesting that you say that, because even as we sort of, did the marketing around rolling out a plant-based program, both online and on ground here in Boulder, it was very much a passion play for me. A very good friend of mine, Lauren Lewis, who's a yogi here in Boulder, wrote the majority of the program. She's been plant-based for a long time. But for the specific reasons, we didn't say it as eloquently as you did, but for the specific reasons of just, attracting a broader audience, we selected the plant-based terminology versus vegan or vegetarian. Although we do have vegan students that come to us and vegetarian students that come to us. So I love that clarity. So the rumor is that you love nothing more, took this right from the internet, than diving into a colossal bowl of salad. I just want to know what's in that bowl, and how big is that bowl?
Well, I always sign off. I've autographed every single one of my 7 books for 17 years with leafy green love, because it's all about the leafy greens, because leafy greens are so extraordinary nutritionally speaking. They are the most health promoting foods, they're the most disease fighting, and they're the most, nutrient dense foods. You get the most nutritional bang for your caloric buck with leafy greens
Yeah.
and cruciferous vegetables. So I love to have a big bowl of goodness. And, it depends on the day. In fact, before we got on here, I was chopping up some vegetables for today's salad. And today I've got some bell peppers and Persian cucumbers and some tomatoes and jalapenos and some fresh shucked corn. And always there'll be some greens. I think today I'm going to do some romaine, and I actually have to stop at the store and get some kale slaw, because I like to just throw that in the bowl. But I kind of change it up. I like cooked vegetables and raw vegetables, like hot and cold salads. I always, will include like a legume or a starch, like the corn or some potatoes. And then the key is the sauce or dressing. So I always say that sauce or dressing is, food is a delivery system for sauce or dressing. And so I love to whip up a really quick and easy nut or seed based dressing that's just full of all that flavor that just makes you want to eat more vegetables.
No, I love that. And you know who else would love that is Farmer Lee Jones, because what you basically just said, that it kind of depends on the season too, right? So your go-to can depend on what's fresh and what's in season, what's local, any particular day. So it all kind of comes together, right?
It does, although I'm a little bit hyper fortunate for where I live, because we can get
You are.
anything any
Yeah.
time of year. We have
Yeah.
farmers markets open all year long. And so, yeah, I do like to emphasize the local seasonal, but we really have access to everything. So kind of biases my palate, and I kind of stick to my favorites most of the time of year, but I do appreciate I don't know, the beautiful kind of synergistic effects with our circadian rhythm and our connection to the earth and seasons and all of that. And unfortunately in LA, we don't really have seasons. We really don't.
Just one long one, right? Yeah.
One long one. It's like it's sunny and hot like 360 days a year. We had a little drizzle, which we desperately need here last week. That's why my hair is curly.
Yeah.
It was a little, it's been a little humid, but we really need that. So yeah, I definitely appreciate the holistic and health benefits of sticking to those closer things. But it is kind of an interesting time in history where we do have so much more access than ever before, and especially here in Los Angeles.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of which, you hold a bachelor's degree in theater from UCLA. You have a master's degree in nutrition from Cal State, and so I'm just fascinated, and I can't wait to hear your response to um, how you bridge these passions, right? So, food, performing, helping people. Can you talk specifically about how your theater training impacts, maybe your approach to food, but more than anything, how you talk about food with others?
I love that Steve Jobs quote of how you can't connect the dots looking forward. You could only do it looking backwards. And I would have never expected this. I didn't plan my journey, but it was quite interesting and unexpected. And I grew up in LA. I started dancing before I could walk, and I loved acting, just like a lot of people here. So I was like, in the lead in the class play, and I was always doing that stuff. But I also ended up in a performing arts high school. So just like Fame, there was this new one in LA like 5 years prior to me getting in, and it was like a really hard school to get into, and you had audition, this whole thing. So I got in, and I was very passionate about Shakespeare and theater, and I did a lot of theater training, and I loved it. I loved it so much. But what happened was, and I just wrote about this in my new book, The Choose You Now Diet, this is where the seed was planted for me. Now, I always also loved fitness. And I remember I have like tape recordings of me at, 5 years old, teaching my friends and sister, aerobics and stuff like that. But the nutrition piece, I was always interested in that. But I will never forget when I was about 10, 11 years old, and I was a ballerina. I was doing so much ballet, and I was in class with all of my little colleagues. And my teacher called out to me in front of everyone, in front of the entire class, Juliana, cut out your snacks. And this was the time when girls are turning into women. And I remember watching in the mirrors, my shape changing. And that floored me. That literally made me want to just be swallowed up and just like disappear, because it was so embarrassing. But it introduced me to this whole world of body image and diets. And it was a blessing in disguise, because I just started reading and studying and trying different diets on, and testing out new things. And it does go with the territory, but it was an evolution for me. And so I kept reading and reading. And this is where the plant-based came in too, because one of the books I stumbled on was John Robbins' Diet for a New America, which shifted my complete thinking about food. I didn't know how food ended up on the plate, because there was no internet. It wasn't really talked about that much. And he was such a revolutionary, such a pioneer, and it moved me. And I wanted to change the system, but first I wanted to change myself. And I didn't know what that looked like. I was a young girl, I was a teenager. And so I was trying to do that. But anyway, I kept learning, I kept reading, kept studying, and I was fascinated by it. And then I wanted to be a doctor, and I was going to I was going to go to med school. So when I got into undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, I was a biology major. So I kind of put the acting dancing to the side, and I went to Santa Cruz, I was studying biology. And I remember my calculus professor, because I was 2 years in, I was taking calculus C on my last quarter of my sophomore year. And I was working so hard with the sciences, because my high school was really good at acting and theater, but it was really not so great with academics. And so I had to really struggle to learn chemistry and biology and all that stuff. But I remember in calculus C, and my professor, who I was going to office hours with religiously, he said to me, he's like, Juliana, go back to dancing. You'll be so much happier, because he could see how stressed out I was. And so I'd already applied to UCLA for physiological sciences major. And after, it was too late, but I had a friend from high school who was in the theater department. He was able to get me an audition for the theater department. So I auditioned last minute, got into the UCLA theater department, and transferred down back here home, and went back to acting and dancing. but I still loved all that science stuff, and it still kept percolating in my brain. And that's the point where I got an agent. I was doing modeling and acting and, all that, mostly acting at the time, theater, mostly some commercials and TV and film stuff. And but then I was like, then my agent at the time said you need to lose a few pounds for camera. Again, it came up. So I was like, oh, okay. So she set me up with this personal trainer. And that was like a whole other, turn of events, because I fell in love with personal training. I'd always loved that. And that was it. I wanted to become a personal trainer. At least it'd be a great side job, or a job while I was doing all the acting auditions and theater at night. And so I became a personal trainer. And then right away, when I was just about to graduate undergrad, and these clients were asking me, well, what should I eat? And I felt this like pull, like I didn't want to just say what I had memorized. There was literally one chapter of nutrition in the personal training handbook that I got certified with. And I didn't feel like I had that expertise, that wherewithal to actually give information, knowing why I was saying what I was saying. So even though I never thought I would ever want to go back to school, I couldn't wait to be done. I was like, so there was a calling. I have to learn I need to know what I'm saying. So I applied to grad school, got in right away. That next fall, like I graduated in April and started in September, August, something like that. And that was it. I fell in love. Like, this was my thing. I was like getting straight A's for the first time in my life. And these were things like, OChem and biochem and statistics. And I loved school so much. I love nutrition. And it took me 7 years because I was a full-time personal trainer. I put acting to the side. But what's so cool about that is, as much as I fell in love with nutrition, it was like, oh, now I have now, and I didn't know. I was like, what a waste of a degree. Why did I bother to get a degree in theater? But and then I ended up having my own TV show and getting, guest spots on Dr. Oz and all that stuff, and then teaching and lecturing and podcasting and everything. And so it was like, wow, everything seriously came together. And now I get to teach what I love to teach with a message that I'm passionate about. And now I know, like, I'm more comfortable in front of the camera, I'm more comfortable in front of a stage. And it all came together in this kind of really cool, unexpected way.
No, and you could tell in your voice how excited you are about that story. And it's a beautiful sort of full circle, right? And I mean, it's so clear that you have this comfort in front of the camera, let's say. I'm gonna just kind of connect that to a really neat story. Years ago when I was, working with a chef, a French chef, um, a French master chef in Portland, Oregon, I think I was. And there was something about, seeing an experienced chef in this beautiful white jacket and the tall toque and the flowing apron. And I found myself watching him a lot, the way he sort of glided through the kitchen, right? And and so here I am over here, like breaking all of these seafood sausages that he asked me to cook so delicately. He comes over and then he's just started talking to me about how, in fact, a chef, a cook, is always on stage. And you have to be aware of that, right? You have to have this presence. And who he used to bring up, this was in the day of Rachel Ray, how Rachel Ray, do you remember her television show where she would she would have a big bowl and she would walk to the refrigerator and she would put everything in it and then bring it back to her, her cooking station. And he used that example as that's the way you should think, mise en place, ahead of time when you're in the kitchen. If you're going to move to one side of the kitchen, sort of glide to that side, but don't dart back and forth, right? Be thinking all the time about what you need, bring it back because the audience is watching, right? They're always watching you. So I love that. That sort of aligns with everything that he shared with me 100 years ago, right? I have to go back a little bit because you started to talk a little bit about your own childhood, and you knew that I was going to get into this, but sort of jumping ahead of myself a little bit. But I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about how important and how to talk to our children about healthy eating and nutritious eating, right? How would you suggest, or how do you talk to clients about addressing that? Because there's lots of influences and there's lots of obstacles to getting your students and your children to kind of follow your lead, right?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And I could speak passionately and empathetically as a mom. I've got 2 teenagers, and when you have kids, like, you just, they're your life, like, they're your heart outside your body. They're just everything. And you want for them the best. You wanna put them in a bubble and protect them and give them all the skills and all the positive everything you possibly can. And I found that it's been incredibly challenging as a dietitian to, really get this message to my children, because there's almost like this, like the cobbler's shoe, what's it called? The cobbler's children. Like, it's like the shoemaker's child doesn't have they have the
Yeah,
holes in their shoes.
sure, sure.
And but I could look at the research, and I've worked with, I don't know, hundreds of families over the 17 years I've been practicing. And what it boils down to, most importantly, number one of all, and all the research substantiates this, is what I like to say: be a lighthouse, not a tugboat. The children are watching. So no matter what you say, it's what you do that they're really taking in and absorbing. So if you want them to eat their broccoli, you're not off there eating your ice cream and telling them they should do such and such. So they're watching you as a role model. And research really, really emphasizes role modeling, and how you are around food is really important for your children to witness. That said, there's other strategies, like, you want to have, it's ideal if both partners, both parents, or whoever's in the home that's raising the children are on the same page. Now, I struggled with that in my marriage and my children, and it was like a real battle, and that was not helpful. But there's families that I know that come to me that are like, we're plant-based and we want to raise our children plant-based, or we want to raise our children healthy. What can we do? And then it's easy, because that's what's in the house. There's only these healthy foods in the house, and this is how we eat. And this is, oh, look how delicious this kale salad is, and that kind of perspective, where it's like, this is for dinner and this is what we're eating. When everyone's on the same page, it's so much easier. Unfortunately, it's not usually the case. More so is the case like I was involved in, where you're like constantly battling. And so ideally you've got that situation, and then you provide healthy food, and then you don't want to have the junk food in the house. You don't want to have, a lot of stuff that you don't want them to eat around, because obviously they're going to go for that. Now, you can't control as much what goes on outside the house, school and peer influences and fast food culture and commercials and internet and TikTok and all the social media that the kids,
YouTube, yeah.
yeah, it's everywhere. And the kids are bombarded with messaging about food that's less than optimal. So, I mean, we've got an obesity crisis and an ongoing chronic disease crisis ubiquitously now globally. And diet is the number one cause of early death and disability in the world. So this is a very major problem for everyone. This is not just, in fact, we have more overnutrition than undernutrition, than malnutrition from undernourishment now, for the first time in recorded history. So you do your best. We provide the role modeling, you provide healthy food. The other tips that I give people is to get your kids involved as much as possible, age appropriately, so that maybe you create an herb garden, or you take them to the farmer's market, or you ask them what they want to cook, or you create like a bar effect, like a taco bar or a pizza bar, so the kids get to choose, where you put all the stuff on the table, and they get to choose what they put on their plate. And so getting them involved gets them invested, emotionally, in wanting to participate in the food thing. And then, like, what my grandma did, because by the way, my parents did not raise me like this. I was always the one like, let's try the low fat diet. Let's try this. Let's eat this. And my family, it was a real struggle. My mom never really loved cooking. She says she does, but it was like all day event for her to make a recipe. And it's very stressful. And she never taught me how to cook. It was never an innate thing. So it was, for me, I had to learn all of this on my own. And so, you know, well, I forgot my train of thought about what I was going to suggest, about getting involved. Like, yeah, having the kid pick a recipe, and then, and then some kids are really interested in that. But, you know, it has to come from like an organic thing. Oh, that's what I was going to say, is that my grandmother, when I was little, this is what incited these little nuggets in my brain, was we would be cooking together. She'd be cooking because she actually enjoyed it. And she'd be like, why are we eating bananas? And I'd say, oh, potassium. Or why do we eat this? And it planted these little like kind of fun seeds about nutrition and food, and how food can be medicinal. And I never thought about it like that, because I wasn't what I was exposed to at home. So those little seeds that you plant, and you get excited about it, like, I don't know. I think all those little things and having healthy foods and, and getting passionate about it. Like here, if you're talking about culinary, the culinary perspective, that's a really beautiful outlet to inspire someone. It's like, oh, look at how gorgeous this is. And look at how fun it is to make this. And oh, we could chop together, just encouraging them where they're at, meeting people where they're at, and their kids evolve over time and their brain capacity, grows and matures. And so they're more apt to absorb different messaging and different things, but they're taking it all in. So just everything matters, and eventually hopefully they come out of it and you've planted some seeds that will grow throughout their lifetime. But the most important thing is role modeling.
No, I love that. And I was going to ask that question, what was it like for you growing up? And I can share too. And I have younger kids as well, and they always laugh because I tell them the stories of, when my mother cooked or my father cooked, that was the meal. So so if it was a braised dish or cauliflower with a poached egg, or whatever the meal was, that was it. And quite honestly, it took me a long time to embrace sort of the way my wife cooks, right? And it's very similar to what you just said. We've got one of those long farm tables. The neighborhood kids love to come over because she does the bar, right? So whether it's, a taco bar or even, an ice cream bar, right? The kids have a choice. And what's really, really interesting is to see where they go. And, and it kind of blows me away sometimes to see how much the kids go to the sweet peppers and the nuts and the things that we don't have to force them to eat. They're put on this farm table. They look beautiful. There might be some dips or not, but they tend to go to it on their own, right? And then you step outside and there's a small garden, so they see, the tomatoes, the zebra tomatoes, make it from that little garden that they planted, sometimes overplanted, right to the table. So that's I'm going to bring up a funny story in a minute with adult learners because it gets a little bit more complicated. But um, I was going to ask real quick, to sort of kind of lean into, you've written 7 books, lots of articles, the TED Talk, nearly. I think the TED Talk was maybe a decade ago or so, 2010 or 12, but
Yeah, it was a
I
decade
could
ago.
500,000 views. I mean, 500,000 views. So in your life and work, you've touched a lot of lives and a lot of people with your message about diet and nutrition, that you clearly deliver with this unbelievable sort of vibrance and enthusiasm, like we're seeing today. I'm wondering, in terms of your mission, you said at the beginning, um, that you were focused on changing yourself. And I absolutely adore that. You were focused on changing yourself. It's so humble, right? Unapologetically humble, right? To be able to admit I need to change myself. Um, so I'm just curious, in terms of Juliana's mission and your purpose, what would you say over time has been the most impactful? I like to speak in moments, right? Even in the restaurant, soup of the moment, dish of the moment, right? I like to live in moments versus hours or weeks. So I'm just really curious, what's been the most impactful moment on your journey? These are the stories I love to share with students.
Well,
Tough
thank you for
question.
saying all of that. It's a tough question. I can't pinpoint a moment. There's been so many different types of moments. There's been moments where I connect with a client, and that's been so extraordinary. Like I work very intimately with my clients. I do a lot of transformations, diet transformation. That's what I do. It's like they come to me and they have a concern, a health issue. They're tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. They're, something happens. They've watched something happen. They're inspired, and we get really, really intimate, and it's very, very intense. And this is what evolved into my last book, Choose You Now. And the concept of Choose You Now, it's that everything happens in the moment, and you have to choose again and again and again. And I said that about me, it having to start with me, because my first few years in this world, I was like trying to tell everyone, you should do this. It's incredible. Look at the research. Look at this. Look at that. And I lost friends. Family didn't want to eat with me anymore. Like I really realized that I can't do that anymore. And I don't know at what moment exactly where I stopped and I said, I'm done. I understand this is so personal. And that is what my TEDx talk was about. It's about food is not just nourishment, it's culture and it's society, and we're tribal people. So breaking bread is very important for our psychological well-being. There's so much depth to why we make our food choices. It represents our families and our culture and our history and our relationships and all of that. And so I realized that it was so personal that I stopped. In fact, I refused to convince anyone. I refused. Like, I will not try. I was doing that for years. And I was banging my head against the wall saying, why are my clients not always succeeding the way I want them to? Because that's what I'm here for. I want to help them. And I realized it's because I was trying to convince people. So I stopped and I decided, if you want to eat this way, or you want to eat healthy, or you want me to help, I will love you all the way through this program. I will hold your hand. I'm your dietitian in your pocket. I have all my clients on my cell phone. They text me all the time when stuff happens. I want to be there for you, but I'm not going to try to convince anyone. And I had a moment, I could share one moment that was profound, but it was already, I'd already known this to be true, but it sealed the deal for me. And it was last year when my father had an incident and it was in the hospital, and he came to, it was kind of like a stroke situation. And he was in a different country. He was in Mexico and I was here at home. I couldn't get there because of passport and COVID and all that. And so when he came to, and I was able to talk to him on FaceTime, and I looked at him and I said, Dad, what happened? And he told me, well, my diet's been not so great. I said, Dad, I could help you with that. That's what I do. I mean, he knows that, but I was like reminding him. And he looked at me and he really profoundly, he said, Joel, you have to want it. And I was like, that's right. So I'm done. I don't try to convince anyone of anything anymore, but I will help anyone until my ultimate capacity. I put everything into helping and doing what I can. I feel like that's what I'm here for. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but I really do. Like, I really want to help as many people in as profound a way as possible. And I think it starts with me making that choice for myself when I did, and how it's evolved for me.
No, that is profound. We sort of say it a little bit differently to students too, adult learners. We need to meet you halfway, right? Our teachers are facilitators of knowledge. They can't make you learn, and they can't promise that you'll learn, but they can present the information, and then the rest is up to you. I I imagine you've touched on a lot of this. I imagine that we all run into people that hear our message, or maybe they don't hear our message, right? They know that they need to focus on um stop to get to a place where they stop being tired of being tired, right? But they don't know where to start, right? And tomorrow I'll do it, tomorrow I'll do it tonight. And we know that a huge part of getting to a place and staying healthy, right? A place that people are comfortable is not just about physical exercise, right? It's about your diet, whether you like that or not. So if someone is new, again, not to put you on the spot, if someone's new to the plant-based movement, let's say, or changing their diet and lifestyle, is there a little bit of advice of how to ease into that? Like, start with the pantry. Let's just start really easy. You mentioned that earlier, about what's in your house and what your children see in the house. Um, would the pantry be the easiest place to start with someone to just kind of make that commitment to change their life?
Well, I would rather look at it more behaviorally and thought wise rather than what's actually in your kitchen. But I could tie that all together actually, because here's what I always say: changing your diet is like learning a new language, very similar. So you think about it like trying new foods as new words. So maybe you've never tried jackfruit, or maybe you've never tried, you know, couscous or quinoa, or, or wild rice, or something anything, or, kale, something you've never tried before. Try it. Try something that sounds good. It's a new word. You're adding new words. And then you tie those together into a recipe. And when I started this, it was not easy to find recipes. There was no Google. It was like you had to, like, there was like a few cookbooks at the at the bookstore, and you just have to kind of like play with things and play in the kitchen. And again, I wasn't experienced as in the kitchen. And so you put it together. Nowadays, you could literally look up anything you've ever wanted to make and you could find it online. And so you don't have to, I always say, use the recipe as a template. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already been done. So if you, let's say you love lasagna, you can Google whole food plant-based lasagna and you'll get so many hits. It's ridiculous. Where do you start? So then if something sounds delicious, start there. Perfect. Good. You start with that. That's like you're a sentence. And then you start, oh, you love this recipe. I started because I would print them out and I would put a heart on the ones I loved. And if I didn't like it, I would try to modify it, or I would just, get rid of it. And then I eventually had a pile of recipes in my repertoire that I loved to eat. And then I started modifying and playing, and I had to write books with recipes and all that. But it just starts with one simple recipe. And then many of us are creatures of habit, myself included. We like rotate through maybe 1 or 2 different breakfasts, maybe 3 or 4 different lunches, maybe 5 or 6 different dinners. Ultimately, we really only rely on maybe 10 recipes a week max. And then we repeat because we like what we like. So if you just think about it, like I just need to find my 10 new people to my 10 new recipes in my repertoire. I call them find your people. That's all you need. That's so much less daunting than thinking of, I have to eat a perfect diet all the time and every day a new recipe. And it doesn't have to be like that. Just go back to basics and find stuff you love. And eventually it becomes fluent. Like you just know how to make those 10 recipes, and then you start building on your repertoire and incorporating different recipes and different foods. And it's kind of exciting because we're really just putting aside, or at least like we have so much landscape on a plate, right? And so like if you're swapping out that big hunk of meat in the middle of it, in rethinking the plate and the bowl, you're really eliminating 5 to 7 different ingredients, but you're opening up your plate to like infinite possibility. There's like, I think 30 or 40,000 varieties of edible grasses rice out there that you could choose from. I mean, there's so many possibilities if you just kind of think outside of the plate that you're used to looking at, that it's really kind of an exciting journey. And my biggest advice is have fun with it. Go in it with wonder and curiosity of what else can you do? What else can you add to your diet? And then you start feeling good and you start noticing the changes. And then it's like this beautiful, self-fulfilling prophecy where just you get better and better, and then it gets easier and easier. And then there's that learning curve that you've gotten past, and and then you get to decide what you want to do after that. You don't have to decide what you're doing next month, next year. It's just, what are you doing? Choose you now. It's all about right now.
I don't know that I've ever heard a dietitian, and I'm not sure what the stereotype is, with as much passion about food. Lots of landscape on the plate. Learning about new food is like learning a new language. Totally stealing all of those, Julieanna, just so you know.
Thank you.
I have to say, I mean, I have this crazy question at Escoffier. One of our newest programs, both online and on ground, is a holistic nutrition and wellness program that is rooted in culinary arts. So the basics are very, very, very important. The basics around cooking. So for some, becoming a professionally trained cook or chef can lead to, whatever they want it to lead to: Michelin stars, local success, name in lights, whatever path you choose. But I'd love to hear you talk about the simple yet complicated approach to preparing ingredients to create nutrient dense meals that achieve, other health and wellness goals that we're talking about. Do you believe that you can do both today? Can you be a Michelin star superstar chef while achieving incredibly, really nutritious food? And I know Tal Ronan is going to say yes, yes, yes. Who I'm sure you know.
Oh, he's amazing. Yeah.
He is amazing, right? And he has this beautiful way of
Yeah.
getting there.
And
Do you,
that restaurant, and his restaurant Crossroads is opening nearby me. They're opening another one.
oh wow,
My
wow.
daughter's all, mommy, they're opening Crossroads. She's like, we're gonna go broke and get fat because we're gonna go there every day.
I don't think
And
you're going to get
so
fat at Crossroads though, right? Oh, I love
it's
that.
pretty decadent. It is decadent. I don't eat that food very often. Restaurant food is decadent. No one's ever asked me that question, Kirk, about Michelin star and healthy. I don't know the answer. I'm not a trained chef. I'm just a
You'd
rookie.
never know that. You'd never know that, because it comes from the heart, right? Sometimes you need the technical prowess. I get it. But most of the cooking comes from the heart, right? When you go to the to the level of certified master chef, let's say through the American Culinary Federation, and you show up that day for 10 days of testing, it's not about recipes. You cook with your heart. You either know how to cook or you don't, right? So that's a compliment to you, by the way. You don't have to be a trained chef when you're moving people to change their lives, to do different things. So, that the Tal example just popped into my head because I've known him for years. I'm like, God, I just answered my own question. Of course he can. Of course he can have incredible success and feeding, Daniel Hume just did it, right? At 11 Madison in New York City, moved his entire, 3 years ago, he's the #1 restaurant in the world and decided to move to plant-based. Doesn't mean it's not the #1 restaurant in the world anymore. He just went plant-based, right?
Quite extraordinary. I want to go check that out. I haven't been there yet, but
Right? Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
I mean, I love what you're saying, and I feel that way too. Like that's how I show love. I always say my love language is making healthy food for people, like healthy, delicious, nutritious food. And I invite my friends. If my friends and family are always like, "When are you making your mushrooms?" Or they want to come over just for me to cook for them, and I love that. But I still feel like I don't really know exactly what I'm doing, and I don't like. I wonder about. I watch these cooking shows. I'm fascinated by it, and I've taken classes, of course, and I've taught classes, which is quite funny because it's like I feel like I'm not really classically trained. I want to be more trained because I would love to know how do you, because I like to cook oil free. I don't use any oil. I don't use any oils at all, any butter, any of that. I don't use a lot of flour, barely at all. I use flour. I don't use refined sugars. I don't add salt. So I'm very particular in terms of nutritional optimacy, like in terms of what I recommend for my clients that are reducing or reversing their chronic disease. So I think there's a shift that has to happen in your palate. And restaurant food by definition is more decadent. And so I wonder about that. Like I deal with my clients going to restaurants and we see the change in their blood work if they're eating accordingly. So I think I've always wanted a movement where it's healthier, but it's really healthy too, and as delicious. But again, we're dealing with a palate, especially here in the United States, we're dealing with the standard American diet where people are getting massive hits of hyper palatable foods all the time, like high in fat and sugar and oil and salt, so much salt. I spent so much time in restaurants, as a dietitian, like looking in the kitchens and watching how they prepare food at 5-star restaurant, top restaurants, and watching kind of how they make it palatable for the public. And so we're used to this certain palate. And there definitely needs to be a shift if you're going to go towards more health promoting foods and clean it up so it's even more healthful. But there's a balance there that has to be kind of discussed and moderated, and depending on your goals, adjusted.
I think that's a really beautiful response. I'm gonna set you up for a finale here. I read, something about the tipping point, your quote, the tipping point. And I'll get a little personal too, right? As I try to connect the dots, to my own life, right? I received a kidney from my father 40 years ago. Long story. It was an
Wow.
incident, but only in recent years, and I've been so fortunate, but only in recent years, as I've grown a little older, and I have my wife to thank for a lot of that, as I've realized how much better a plant-based diet makes me feel. I still believe, we run a culinary school. There's something to be said about, beautiful food that is raised by beautiful farmers, whether it's wine or lamb or, I'm totally, not opposed to any of that. We just made some personal choices in our life, right? And I realized how important controlling inflammation, specifically for me, has been, right? And so here's a tough question. It's kind of funny, kind of not, right? Um, we recently added. My goal was to add a snack machine to the campus because the students have asked for it, right? In between classes, just need a little something, something. Even though we have Whole Foods and everything, they wanted their own little snack machine. So as we build the snack machine, we survey them. And the number one, I'm not going to say the brands, but let's just say the podium included energy drinks and high sugar, saturated fat snacks. Okay. So I get it. I'm not picking on my students at all. And I'm just wondering how to change the message. On one of your podcasts, you mentioned that we're at a tipping point, that we have a chance to redefine normal. Let's and these are your words. Let's be revolutionaries, right? Let's claim our children's, going back to that, health and their future. So, we talked about kiddos earlier today, and you have also proposed all these incredibly cool, simple, breaking ideas, like making your kids lunch before they go to school, right? It's funny how we do it. We have the menu up on the refrigerator, and we have the discussion with our kids before they go. And 9 times out of 10, they're like, mommy, make my lunch, because they don't want the nachos, right? Um, so we can work with adult learners right here on the campus, outside of their typical lessons. One crazy idea was that we have them make their own snacks. Let's just pull them aside, create another class. They can make their own snacks. But do you, and it's tough. Do you believe, Juliana, that it's getting easier to find that people are embracing the idea of healthy eating and a healthy lifestyle? Or is it still, I don't think plant-based is a trend. I really don't. But I think it's here to stay. I think it's here to stay
Oh,
for forever, forever.
like what?
Caught you off guard. It's not a trend. It's here forever. I mean, we have full-blown programs, around this. And they're phenomenal students, if I could just tell you, because they come to us with unbelievable knowledge, and some confusion, but unbelievable knowledge around plant-based cooking and lifestyle. But I'm curious, do you believe it's getting easier for people, because of people like you, to embrace that lifestyle? Or is it still really hard to overcome?
I I don't know even how to answer that other than to say back to you have to want it. And so my other saying that I published in Vegetarian Diet was you could lead a human to healthy, but you can't make them eat. And I think what I start with my clients is why now? Why do you want this? Why? Write it out. Think about it. Because it's so hard in this culture. You are bombarded by temptations that are hyper palatable foods. And there's no competition between an ooey gooey pizza hot off the grill or whatever out of the pizza oven and, crudité and hummus for a lot of people. That's a no-brainer for a lot of people unless you want it and you need it and there's a reason for it. And so, like I said, I won't try to convince anyone, but I literally do quiz my client. Like when they reach out to me, I'm very careful who I choose to work with because I have to make sure they want this. Otherwise, it's beating my head against the wall. It's a waste of all of our time. And it's disappointing to them. It's disappointing to me if it's not effective. Because if you want it, you can do this, but you have to change your palate. And so if you change your palate and you get one hit of something, a chocolate peanut butter cake, whatever, something that was your thing, and you get this big hit of it and that sugar rush and that dopamine rush, it's very hard to come away from that and get back to your palate. So I call it days of deliciousness. That's how I phrase it and frame it, where it's like if you stay on plan and you're eating a healthy diet, most of the time there's always room for treats as long as you get back on your plan. Because if you eat a couple days of these hyper palatable foods, your palate goes back. We're never immune to that. Salt, sugar, oil, flour, all that stuff, there's a biochemical reaction that takes place. And if you're out in the world saying, no, I'm eating healthy right now, everyone will try to stop you. Everyone's going to
Mm,
ask you,
mm.
oh, aren't you getting too thin? Oh, aren't you worried about protein? All these little things that people plant, these seeds in your brain that grow. And then you're worried about protein. You find yourself worried about B12. You find yourself, and the palate is it's like, it's really hard. Like you have to like really want it badly enough to say no to these things all the time. You could have anything now delivered to your door. There's all these different apps that will deliver anything to your door, fast food, anything at your door 24/7, and you have to keep staying on course. And there's messaging everywhere, these flashes of pictures and imagery. I mean, I have to sometimes get off social media because it's like it makes me think about food in ways that I wouldn't normally think about. And it's because we're human. So we are human adapted in for times of scarcity, right? We are adapted to survive and take in as much calorie as we can possible to store for later, but later never comes. And here we are constantly dealing with these battles. So I don't know if there's more of it. We're still creeping up in obesity rates. We're still creeping up in, cardiovascular disease is not going anywhere. It's still the number one killer around the world. And yet it's so preventable for so many people. Type 2 diabetes. I mean, it's kind of interesting. And then even the vegan movement, I have long-term vegans coming to me in the last 7-8 years that have the same health issues as the omnivores because of all of the foods that are now made vegan and are very similar to the animal version. Like a burger that looks like a burger, no matter what it's made out of, it's still high in a lot of them are high in saturated fat and all that. So again, I like to frame it as this is a healthy diet based on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices, and infinite tasty combinations, and have a day of deliciousness planned if you need to or want to, and then go back to your whole plant foods.
So well said. And what a great answer to one you weren't expecting. I absolutely love it. I don't know where the time went. I can't believe how much fun this has been. I just adore you. Your message is just spectacular, and your energy is infectious. I just love it. But before I let you go, and plus I'm going to reach back out to you because it would be so fun to have you on a webinar with our students. We're going to call it Be a Lighthouse, Not a Tugboat. People will go crazy. I can't wait. But before I let you go, the name of the podcast is The Ultimate Dish. You've talked a lot about food today. So, Julieanna, what is the ultimate dish?
Well, thank you for all those beautiful things you said. I really appreciate that. I would love to be on there answering questions on a webinar with your students. And there's so many ways to answer that question, but I think it comes down to what I said before about like my love language is showing my love for someone by feeding them healthy, delicious, nutritious food and filling their bodies, because you are quite literally what you eat, and filling them with nutritious items that they enjoy and that will bring them lasting health, at least for that moment. So I love connecting and bonding over healthy food. It's everything to me.
Absolutely perfect answer. And after 65 podcasts, no one has called food their love language. So absolutely yours. I won't let anyone else say that. Perfect. And I won't steal that. That's absolutely beautiful. Thanks so much for spending some time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, a great salad for the family tonight. And I'll be sure to reach out, and we'll get in front of some students real soon.
Thank you so much, Kirk. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast, where you'll find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. You can also browse other episodes and subscribe.